Hello, everyone. Welcome back to English and Smart Practice. I'm Elena, your host, and today we're taking your English fluency to an exciting new level. You've probably already mastered those essential connectors that make your speech flow beautifully, but what if you want to add even more everyday polish and truly sound like a native speaker? Today, we're diving deep into the world of 50 unique English connectors. These are phrases and words you'll hear natives use constantly, but which aren't always taught in standard lessons. They're those verbal shortcuts and subtle signals that make conversations effortless, natural, and incredibly engaging. Learning these connectors will do more than just expand your vocabulary. They're going to help you express yourself with incredible nuance. Go beyond basic statements to convey subtle meanings. Sound naturally fluent. Weave your ideas together smoothly, just like native speakers do. Guide your listener. Make it easy for others to follow your thoughts and arguments. And ultimately gain confidence. Feel more at ease in a wider range of conversations and situations. Before we jump into these fantastic linguistic tools, if you haven't already, please remember to subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon. This ensures you won't miss any of our upcoming lessons designed to empower your English journey. All right, let's unlock some truly unique ways to connect your thoughts and impress with your English every single day. These connectors allow you to add subtle layers of meaning, emphasize an additional point, or introduce supporting information in a more sophisticated way than just using and or also. First, let's talk about as a matter of fact. This is a great phrase to add emphasis, provide a stronger or more accurate piece of information, or even correct a misconception in everyday conversation. It basically means in reality or actually. For example, if someone says, I thought you were busy, you might reply, as a matter of fact, I just finished my work. See how it feels really natural for adding a surprising or clarifying detail? Another common use. It wasn't easy. As a matter of fact, it was quite difficult. Let's practice. I'll say the example, and you can repeat it after me. I heard you don't like coffee. As a matter of fact, I love it. Ready? I heard you don't like coffee. As a matter of fact, I love it. Now you try. She looks tired. As a matter of fact, she worked all night. Next up is mind you. This informal phrase is used to introduce a qualification, a warning, or an additional thought that clarifies or sometimes contrasts what you've just said. It's often spoken with a slight pause before it. For instance, the movie was good, mind you. The ending was a bit confusing. This adds a small caveat to your positive statement. Another example. It's a challenging job, mind you. It's also very rewarding. It's perfect for adding an afterthought or a nuance. Let's practice. The food was delicious, mind you. It was quite spicy. Repeat after me. The food was delicious, mind you. It was quite spicy. Now you try. He's very talented, mind you. He practices constantly. Then we have namely. This connector is fantastic for making your points more specific by introducing a list or a precise example that explains what you just mentioned. It means that is to say, or specifically, for example, there's one thing we need to discuss, namely the budget. This clearly defines what that one thing is. Another instance, she has two main hobbies, namely reading and painting. It's more precise than just, for example, when you're listing exact items. Let's practice. We have to address a critical issue, namely the lack of communication. Repeat after me. we have to address a critical issue, namely the lack of communication. Now you try. He's good at sports, namely basketball and tennis. Moving on top of that, this informal connector is used to add another piece of information that builds on what you've just said, often implying that it's an additional, sometimes compounding factor. It essentially means in addition to that, and is very common in casual conversation. For example, the rent is expensive, and on top of that, the building is quite old. See how it adds another negative point? Another example, she got a promotion, and on top of that, a significant raise. It emphasizes an accumulating benefit. Let's practice. The flight was delayed, and on top of that, my luggage was lost. Repeat after me. The flight was delayed, and on top of that, my luggage was lost. Now you try. The food was delicious, and on top of that, the service was excellent. Next, what's more? This phrase is used to add an extra piece of information that is often more important, surprising, or adds greater weight to what you've just said. It's a slightly more emphatic way to say in addition. For example, he's incredibly intelligent, and what's more, he's extremely humble. The humility here is an impressive added quality. Another example, the new policy saves money, and what's more, it improves efficiency. It often highlights a significant bonus. Let's practice. The movie was entertaining, and what's more, it had a powerful message. Repeat after me. The movie was entertaining, and what's more, it had a powerful message. Now you try. She finished the project early, and what's more, it was perfect. Then, additionally, this connector is a slightly more formal but still very common way to introduce an extra piece of information or another point, often used in presentations or more structured conversations. It means in addition or further. For example, our company offers great benefits. Additionally, we have a fantastic work culture. It builds on the previous positive point. Another example, you need to bring your passport. Additionally, make sure you have your visa. Let's practice. The product is user-friendly. Additionally, it's very affordable. Repeat after me. The product is user-friendly. Additionally, it's very affordable. Now you try. The food was fresh. Additionally, the service was excellent. Another useful connector is not to mention. This informal phrase is used to introduce an extra point that is particularly important or noteworthy, often as an afterthought or for emphasis. It means and especially. For instance, the trip was amazing. We saw beautiful sights, not to mention the incredible food. It highlights the food as a significant part of the experience. Another example, he's very supportive, not to mention incredibly generous. Let's practice. She's a great chef, not to mention an excellent baker. Repeat after me. She's a great chef, not to mention an excellent baker. Now you try. The weather was perfect, not to mention the stunning views. Finally, in this section, we have coupled with. This connector implies that two things are combined or occur together, and their combination leads to a particular result or situation. It's a slightly more formal but common way to link contributing factors. For example, strong leadership coupled with a dedicated team led to their success. It shows how the two elements worked together. Another example, lack of sleep coupled with stress can affect your health. Let's practice. Hard work coupled with natural talent makes a great athlete. Repeat after me. Hard work coupled with natural talent makes a great athlete. Now you try. High demand coupled with limited supply increased prices. These phrases allow you to smoothly introduce opposing ideas or acknowledge a point before presenting your own, making your debates and discussions sound much more natural and balanced. First, let's explore having said that, or its shorter form, that said. These are incredibly common in spoken English to acknowledge a previous point or concede something, then immediately introduce a contrasting or balancing idea. For example, the car is expensive. Having said that, it's also very reliable. You admit the high price but then counter with its good quality. Or, I don't usually like action movies. That said, this one was actually quite good. These phrases make your argument sound balanced and thoughtful. Let's practice. The job requires long hours. Having said that, the pay is excellent. Repeat after me. The job requires long hours. Having said that, the pay is excellent. Now you try. It's a tough decision. That said, we need to make it. Next, we have even so. This connector is used to emphasize that something is true or will happen despite a previous statement or condition. It's a slightly stronger version of even though or nevertheless, often used when the contrasting point is a bit surprising. For instance, it started raining. Even so, we decided to go for a walk. The rain didn't stop them. Another example. The task was difficult. Even so, she managed to complete it. It conveys a sense of perseverance or an unyielding fact. Let's practice. He apologized. Even so, I'm still upset. Repeat after me. He apologized. Even so, I'm still upset. Now you try. The food was cold. Even so, it tasted good. Then, be that as it may. This phrase is a polite and sophisticated way to acknowledge a previous point or argument, but then shift to make a new, often contrasting point. It means despite what has been said, or even if that is true. For example, the argument was compelling. Be that as it may, I still have doubts. It allows you to concede a point while still holding your ground. Another example. It's a tough market. Be that as it may, we must persevere. Let's practice. The deadline is tight. Be that as it may, we will deliver on time. Repeat after me. The deadline is tight. Be that as it may, we will deliver on time. Now you try. The weather is bad. Be that as it may, we still need to go. Moving on, whereas. This connector is used to introduce a statement that contrasts with something previously mentioned. It often presents two opposing ideas or facts within the same sentence or across two linked sentences. For example, my brother loves classical music, whereas I prefer rock. This highlights a direct difference in preference. Another example, some people prefer to work alone, whereas others thrive in a team. It's great for direct comparisons. Let's practice. She enjoys quiet evenings, whereas her roommate loves loud parties. Repeat after me. She enjoys quiet evenings, whereas her roommate loves loud parties. Now you try. He's very tall, whereas his sister is quite short. Next, by contrast. This phrase is used to introduce a noticeable difference with something previously mentioned. It signals a clear comparison between two distinct entities or ideas. For instance, the old system was slow and inefficient. By contrast, the new system is incredibly fast. It sets up a strong opposition. Another example, city life is fast-paced. By contrast, rural life is much more relaxed. It's very common in discussions or reports. Let's practice. Our initial sales were low. By contrast, our current figures are excellent. Repeat after me. Our initial sales were low. By contrast, our current figures are excellent. Now you try. She's an extrovert. By contrast, her husband is an introvert. Then, unlike. This connector directly highlights a dissimilarity or difference from something else. It clearly states that something is not like another thing. For example, unlike my brother, I enjoy cooking. This shows a clear difference in hobbies. Another instance, unlike most smartphones, this model has a very long battery life. It's concise and effective for pointing out differences. Let's practice. Unlike the previous version, the new software is very easy to use. Repeat after me. Unlike the previous version, the new software is very easy to use. Now you try. Unlike me, she loves waking up early. Another useful one is on the contrary. This is a strong phrase used to directly contradict or express the opposite of what was just said or implied. It often shows disagreement or correction. For example, I thought you disliked the proposal. On the contrary, I find it very promising. This expresses a clear opposing view. Another example, it's not a failure. On the contrary, it's a valuable learning experience. It emphasizes a direct opposition. Let's practice. You think he's lazy? On the contrary, he's one of the hardest workers. Repeat after me. You think he's lazy? On the contrary, he's one of the hardest workers. Now you try. I wasn't disappointed. On the contrary, I was thrilled. Finally, in this section, we have while used for contrast. While often means at the same time, it's also very commonly used to introduce a contrasting idea or a concession, similar to although, but often more conversational. For example, while I understand your point, I don't entirely agree. It acknowledges one side but presents a different view. Another instance, while the weather was cold, we still enjoyed the hike. It balances two pieces of information. Let's practice. While the project was challenging, it was also very rewarding. Repeat after me. While the project was challenging, it was also very rewarding. Now you try. While she is intelligent, she can also be quite stubborn. These connectors help you explain the conditions under which something will happen, the specific purpose behind an action, or the underlying reason for a situation, adding precision to your plans and explanations. First, consider given that. This connector means considering that or because of the fact that. It's used to introduce a known fact or circumstance that forms the basis for your next statement or conclusion. For example, given that the economy is unstable, we need to be careful with our investments. The economic situation is the reason for caution. Another example, given that you're busy, I can help with this task. It implies a logical consequence. Let's practice. Given that it's late, we should probably go home. Repeat after me. Given that it's late, we should probably go home. Now you try. Given that the forecast is rain, we should bring umbrellas. Next up is in the event that. This phrase is used to talk about a possible future situation or contingency. It means if something happens or should it occur. Well, it's common for planning or stating precautions. For example, in the event that you have questions, please contact our support team. This prepares for a potential query. Another example, in the event of a power outage, use the emergency lights. You can use in the event of followed by a noun or in the event that followed by a clause. Let's practice. In the event that the flight is delayed, we will notify you. Repeat after me. In the event that the flight is delayed, we will notify you. Now you try. In the event of an emergency, call 911. Then, to that end. This connector is used to introduce the purpose or goal of a previous statement or action, providing clarity and logical flow. It means for that specific purpose or with that goal in mind. For example, we need to improve our communication. To that end, we will hold weekly team meetings. The meetings are specifically for improving communication. Another example, he wants to learn Spanish. To that end, he practices daily. Let's practice. We are developing a new product. To that end, we have invested heavily in research. Repeat after me. We are developing a new product. To that end, we have invested heavily in research. Now you try. She wants to become a doctor. To that end, she studies very hard. Moving on, in light of. This formal but commonly used phrase means considering or because of a particular situation or new information. It indicates that a decision or action is being made based on recent developments. For example, in light of the recent changes, we need to revise our strategy. The changes are the reason for the revision. Another example, the meeting was canceled in light of the bad weather. It's a great way to explain the context of a decision. Let's practice. In light of the new evidence, the investigation has been reopened. Repeat after me. In light of the new evidence, the investigation has been reopened. Now you try. In light of your feedback, we have made some adjustments. Next, consequently. This connector means as a result, or therefore, introducing a direct and logical outcome of a previous action or event. It's slightly more formal than so, but very common in explanations. For instance, the company's profits increased. Consequently, they decided to hire more staff. The hiring is a direct result of the profits. Another example, she didn't study for the exam. Consequently, she performed poorly. It clearly links cause and effect. Let's practice. The roads were icy. Consequently, traffic was very slow. Repeat after me. The roads were icy. Consequently, traffic was very slow. Now you try. He missed his flight. Consequently, he arrived a day late. Then, on account of. This phrase means because of or due to, providing a reason for something. It's often used when the reason is a circumstance or an event. For example, the game was postponed on account of the heavy rain. The rain is the reason for the postponement. Another example, she couldn't attend the meeting on account of a prior engagement. It's a common way to explain why something happened. Let's practice. He was late on account of the traffic accident. Repeat after me. He was late on account of the traffic accident. Now you try. The shop closed early on account of the holiday. Another very useful connector is thereby. This word means by that means or as a result of that. It's used to introduce the consequence or effect of the action mentioned in the main clause, often in a more concise way. For example, he trained diligently, thereby improving his performance significantly. The diligent training led to the improved performance. Another example, the company cut costs, thereby increasing its profits. It directly links an action to its outcome. Let's practice. She learned new skills, thereby opening up new career opportunities. Repeat after me. She learned new skills, thereby opening up new career opportunities. Now you try. They work together, thereby finishing the project faster. Finally, in this section, we have as a result of which. This longer phrase is a slightly more formal but clear way to introduce a consequence that specifically stems from a previous action or situation. It connects a past event to its direct outcome. For instance, the company invested heavily in research, as a result of which they developed groundbreaking new products. The product development is a direct result of the investment. Another example, he ignored the advice, as a result of which he made a costly mistake. Let's practice. She practiced every day, as a result of which her English improved dramatically. Repeat after me. She practiced every day, as a result of which her English improved dramatically. Now you try. The storm caused widespread damage, as a result of which many homes were without power. These connectors help you explain the order of events, steps in a process, or points in an argument with precision and a natural flow, going beyond simple first, then next. First, consider first and foremost. This emphatic phrase is used to highlight the most important point or priority. It's stronger than a simple first and immediately draws attention to what's crucial. For example, first and foremost, we need to ensure the safety of our employees. This sets the top priority. Another example. My goal is, first and foremost, to finish this project. It's great for making your main point stand out. Let's practice. First and foremost, thank you all for coming today. Repeat after me. First and foremost, thank you all for coming today. Now you try. First and foremost, we must respect each other's opinions. Next, we have last but not least. This common phrase is used to introduce the final item in a list, especially when you want to emphasize that it is as important as, or even more important than, the preceding items. It builds anticipation for the last point. For example, we've discussed planning, execution, and last but not least, evaluation. It gives due importance to the final step. Another example, thanks to John, Sarah, and last but not least, our dedicated volunteers. Let's practice. Our team includes designers, developers, and last but not least, our amazing testers. Repeat after me. Our team includes designers, developers, and last but not least, our amazing testers. Now you try. The meal featured appetizers, main courses, and last but not least, delicious desserts. Moving on, subsequently. This connector means afterward or later, indicating that something happened immediately after a previous event. It's a slightly more formal alternative to then or after that, common in narrative or official contexts. For example, the report was submitted, and subsequently a meeting was called. The meeting happened right after the submission. Another example, he lost his job and subsequently struggled to find new employment. Let's practice. She finished her degree. Subsequently, she found a great job. Repeat after me. She finished her degree. Subsequently, she found a great job. Now you try. The instructions were given. Subsequently, the team began the task. Then, prior to. This phrase means before or earlier than, specifying that something happened before a particular event or time. It's more formal than before, but very common in everyday explanations. For example, prior to the meeting, I reviewed all the documents. This shows you prepared beforehand. Another example, you need to submit the form prior to the deadline. It clearly sets a time boundary. Let's practice. Prior to starting the engine, check the oil. Repeat after me. Prior to starting the engine, check the oil. Now you try. Prior to our departure, we packed all our bags. Another useful connector is meanwhile. This word is used to indicate that something else is happening at the same time as another event, or during the period between two events. It adds a sense of simultaneous action or a change in focus. For example, I was cooking dinner. Meanwhile, my husband was setting the table. This describes parallel activities. Another example, the company launched its new product. Meanwhile, competitors were developing similar technologies. Let's practice. The children played in the park. Meanwhile, their parents relaxed on a bench. Repeat after me. The children played in the park. Meanwhile, their parents relaxed on a bench. Now you try. The team worked on the presentation. Meanwhile, the manager prepared the report. Next, in the interim. This phrase means in the meantime, or during the period between two events. It's similar to meanwhile, but often implies a temporary period while waiting for something else to happen. For instance, the new software will be released next month. In the interim, we will use the old system. This sets a temporary plan. Another example, she's waiting for her visa. In the interim, she's working part-time. It's perfect for explaining temporary arrangements. Let's practice. The repairs will take a week. In the interim, you can use a loaner car. Repeat after me. The repairs will take a week. In the interim, you can use a loaner car. Now you try. He's studying for his exam. In the interim, he's also working. Then, up until now. This phrase is used to describe a situation or action that has been true or happening continuously from the past until the present moment, often implying that a change is about to occur or has just occurred. It sets a clear time frame. For example, up until now, we've always used traditional marketing. This implies a shift to new methods. Another example, up until now, I hadn't realized how important this was. It highlights a past state that changes in the present. Let's practice. Up until now, I thought it was impossible. Repeat after me. Up until now, I thought it was impossible. Now you try. Up until now, the weather has been perfect. Finally, in this section, we have to begin with. This phrase is used to introduce the first point or reason in a discussion or explanation, often when listing multiple reasons or starting a complex topic. It sets the stage for what you're about to say. For example, to begin with, I'd like to thank everyone for their hard work. This is the opening point. Another example, why did I choose this course? To begin with, I'm very interested in the subject. It's a natural way to kick off an explanation. Let's practice. To begin with, let's review our goals for today. Repeat after me. To begin with, let's review our goals for today. Now you try. To begin with, the cost was a major factor. These connectors allow you to rephrase, highlight, or stress certain points, making your message exceptionally clear and ensuring your audience understands exactly what you mean. First, let's look at specifically. This connector is used to introduce a precise detail or to clarify exactly what you are referring to, narrowing down a general statement. For example, I like all kinds of music, specifically classical and jazz. You're naming the exact types. Another example, we need to address the issue, specifically how it impacts customer satisfaction. It adds precision. Let's practice. She's studying several languages, specifically Spanish and French. Repeat after me. She's studying several languages, specifically Spanish and French. Now you try. He enjoys outdoor activities, specifically hiking. Next up is in particular. Similar to specifically, this phrase emphasizes one item or aspect above others in a group, highlighting its importance or relevance. For instance, I enjoy all sports, but football in particular. This singles out football as a favorite. Another example, the new policy affects all departments, in particular sales and marketing. It draws special attention to certain areas. Let's practice. The book was excellent, in particular the last chapter. Repeat after me. The book was excellent, in particular the last chapter. Now you try. I love traveling, in particular to historical sites. Then, needless to say. This phrase is used to introduce a point that is so obvious or well known that it doesn't need to be stated, yet you state it for emphasis or completeness. For example, the team worked tirelessly and needless to say, they achieved their goal. The success was inevitable. Another example. He's been practicing for years, needless to say, he's very skilled. It highlights an undeniable fact. Let's practice. The weather was terrible, needless to say, the outdoor event was canceled. Repeat after me. The weather was terrible, needless to say, the outdoor event was canceled. Now you try. She's a brilliant student. Needless to say, she passed with flying colors. Moving on, crucially. This adverbial connector emphasizes that a point is of extreme importance, implying that it is essential for understanding or for the outcome of a situation. For example, the first step is planning, but crucially, we need to secure funding. Funding is the vital element. Another example. Listen carefully because crucially, this information will be on the test. It signals paramount importance. Let's practice. The details are complex, but crucially, we must focus on the main objective. Repeat after me. The details are complex, but crucially, we must focus on the main objective. Now you try. Communication is important, but crucially, listening is vital. Next, notably. This connector is used to highlight something particularly important, interesting, or remarkable that deserves special attention. It means especially or significantly. For example, the report listed several areas for improvement, notably customer service. This singles out customer service as a key area. Another example, many experts contributed to the project, notably Professor Lee. It points out a distinguished contributor. Let's practice. The city has many attractions, notably its historic Old Town. Repeat after me. The city has many attractions, notably its historic Old Town. Now you try. Her performance was impressive, notably her dedication. Then, in other words, this very common phrase is used to rephrase something that was just said, usually to make it simpler, clearer, or to explain it differently. It's excellent for ensuring understanding. For example, the company needs to restructure its marketing strategy. In other words, they need to reach a wider audience. You're simplifying the meaning. Another example, he's very meticulous. In other words, he pays attention to every detail. It provides an alternative explanation. Let's practice. The new policy emphasizes collaboration. In other words, we need to work together more. Repeat after me. The new policy emphasizes collaboration. In other words, we need to work together more. Now you try. She's a polyglot. In other words, she speaks many languages. Another useful connector is to be fair. This phrase is used to introduce a point that shows consideration for another person's perspective, acknowledges a difficulty, or provides a more balanced view, even if it goes against your initial argument. It's about acknowledging fairness. For example, he made a mistake, but to be fair, he was under a lot of pressure. You're acknowledging the extenuating circumstance. Another example. The project was delayed. To be fair, the weather was terrible. It offers a mitigating factor. Let's practice. The food wasn't perfect, but to be fair, it was very cheap. Repeat after me. The food wasn't perfect, but to be fair, it was very cheap. Now you try. She can be demanding. To be fair, her standards are very high. Next, to reiterate. When you want to re-emphasize a point or summarize something you've already said, to reiterate is a formal and clear way to do it. It signals that you are repeating something for emphasis or clarity. For example, to reiterate, timely submission is essential for this project. This ensures the point is clearly understood. Another example, to reiterate, our main objective is customer satisfaction. Let's practice. To reiterate, safety protocols must always be followed. Repeat after me. To reiterate, safety protocols must always be followed. Now you try. To reiterate, teamwork is key to our success. Finally, in this section, to put it simply or simply put. These phrases are perfect for simplifying a complex idea or summarizing something in a very straightforward way. They signal that you're about to give a concise, easy-to-understand version. For example, the new system has many features, but to put it simply, it will save us a lot of time. You cut through the complexity. Another example, simply put, we need to increase sales. They are incredibly useful for clarity. Let's practice. The economic situation is complicated, but to put it simply, we need to adapt. Repeat after me. The economic situation is complicated, but to put it simply, we need to adapt. Now you try. Simply put, you need to practice every day to improve. These connectors help you summarize, give a general impression, introduce your own viewpoint, or bring your thoughts to a clear and natural close in everyday conversations. First, let's explore all things considered. This phrase is used to indicate that you are taking all factors and circumstances into account when making a general statement or drawing a conclusion. It means when everything is taken into account. For example, all things considered, the event was a huge success despite the challenges. It offers an overall positive assessment. Another example, all things considered, it was a good decision to move here. It provides a balanced, comprehensive summary. Let's practice. All things considered, the team performed admirably this season. Repeat after me. All things considered, the team performed admirably this season. Now you try. All things considered, it was a productive day. Next we have from my perspective. This phrase is excellent for clearly stating that you are offering your own opinion or viewpoint, especially when discussing different ideas. It's a polite and common way to introduce a personal take. For example, from my perspective, the new plan is a good idea. You're sharing your personal belief. Another example, from my perspective, teamwork is key to success. It emphasizes your individual view. Let's practice. From my perspective, the movie was quite thought-provoking. Repeat after me. From my perspective, the movie was quite thought-provoking. Now you try. From my perspective, we need more time. Then, for one thing. This phrase is used to introduce the first reason or example in a list of several that support your point. It signals that you're about to give a specific reason, with more potentially to follow. For example, why don't I like cold weather? For one thing, it's hard to stay warm. This is your primary reason. Another instance. Oh, he's a great colleague. For one thing, he's always willing to help. It sets up a series of supporting points. Let's practice. I can't go out tonight. For one thing, I'm really tired. Repeat after me. I can't go out tonight. For one thing, I'm really tired. Now you try. Why is this project challenging? For one thing, the deadline is tight. Moving on. In a nutshell. This is a very informal and common phrase used to summarize something briefly and concisely, getting straight to the main point. It means in short, or to put it simply, but with a more casual feel. For example, the whole story is complicated, but in a nutshell, we won. You're given the essence. Another example. In a nutshell, the meeting was very productive. It's perfect for a quick, informal recap. Let's practice. His philosophy is complex, but in a nutshell, he believes in kindness. Repeat after me. His philosophy is complex, but in a nutshell, he believes in kindness. Now you try. The problem is complicated, but in a nutshell, we need more resources. Next, ultimately. This connector is used to introduce the final or most important result, conclusion, or outcome after a series of events or considerations. It implies a sense of finality or the bottom line. For example, we tried many different strategies, but ultimately the simplest one worked best. This is the final successful outcome. Another example, he faced many challenges, but ultimately he achieved his dream. It shows the final culmination. Let's practice. The process was long, but ultimately it was worth it. Repeat after me. The process was long, but ultimately it was worth it. Now you try. Ultimately, the decision rests with you. Then, to recap. This informal phrase is used to quickly summarize or review the main points that have just been discussed. Well, it's a more conversational alternative to summarize or in conclusion. For instance, we've covered a lot of ground today. To recap, we discussed planning, execution, and review. It signals a quick summary. Another example. To recap, remember to practice daily. It's perfect for a brief review. Let's practice. The meeting covered many topics. To recap, we agreed on the budget and the timeline. Repeat after me. The meeting covered many topics. To recap, we agreed on the budget and the timeline. Now you try. To recap, our main goal is customer satisfaction. Another very useful connector is by the same token. This excellent connector is used to introduce a statement that is similar to or logically connected with a previous one, often used to present a parallel argument or a comparable situation. For example, exercise is important for health. By the same token, good nutrition is crucial. It shows a parallel importance. Another example, he expects loyalty from his friends, and by the same token, he offers it. Let's practice. Education requires dedication. By the same token, success demands perseverance. Repeat after me. Education requires dedication. By the same token, success demands perseverance. Now you try. He trusts his team. By the same token, they trust him. Next, long story short. This is a very common informal phrase used to summarize a lengthy explanation or narrative quickly, getting straight to the main point or outcome. It's perfect for everyday storytelling. For example, I had a terrible day, but long story short, I finally got home. You skip all the details of the bad day. Another example, we argued for hours and long story short, we finally agreed. It's a great way to be concise. Let's practice. I tried to fix my computer for hours, and long story short, I ended up buying a new one. Repeat after me. I tried to fix my computer for hours, and long story short, I ended up buying a new one. Now you try. We traveled all day, and long story short, we made it just in time. Finally, in this section, on the whole. This phrase is used to introduce a general statement or conclusion that considers most aspects of a situation, even if there are some exceptions. It's similar to overall, but often has a slightly more reflective tone. For example, the weather was unpredictable, but on the whole, the vacation was enjoyable. It gives a general positive assessment. Another example, the project had some minor issues, but on the whole, it was a success. It's great for offering a balanced general impression. Let's practice. The training was challenging, but on the whole, it was very beneficial. Repeat after me. The training was challenging, but on the whole, it was very beneficial. Now you try. The team's performance was mixed, but on the whole, they improved. Wow, you've just explored 50 truly unique English connectors that are perfect for daily use. They make your conversations flow effortlessly, allowing you to sound much more natural and advanced. These aren't just fancy words. They are the everyday glue that helps native speakers communicate with such ease and nuance. The real magic happens when you start using them. Choose a few of these unique connectors that you particularly like and consciously try to incorporate them into your daily English practice. Listen for them in movies, TV shows, and podcasts. You'll be amazed at how often you hear them. The more you use them, the more automatic they'll become, and the more confident and natural you'll sound. Thank you so much for joining me today on English in Moments. If you found this lesson helpful and feel more confident about adding these unique connectors to your vocabulary, please give this video a big thumbs up. Share it with anyone who wants to boost their English. And of course, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and have that notification bell turned on so you don't miss any of our future lessons. I'm Elena, and I can't wait to see you next time for another English in Moments. Keep learning and keep shining. Bye for now.